Knock this sucker out of here. Just do the best you can. Try not to damage it as much as possible, the housing. You're going to mar up the rear end seal, but that's okay. We're just going to replace it anyway. So, just bang it out best you can. She's starting to move. Okay, there she starts to come out. There she goes. Let's see if I'm still in with you. Okay. Back it up a little bit. As you can see, this is not fun. Not any easy way. Just muscle it out of there the best you can. She's starting to come out, as you can see. There she goes. Ouch. There you go. Brute force always works. That's my way of taking it out. If you do manage to mar up the outer housing here, just get a file, make sure it's on, especially on the inside race here where the new seal is going to go in, and just clean that up with a file, and make sure that you don't get any of the files into the bearing if you're gonna keep that bearing in there. Just keep it all, should keep it all clean anyway. But that's it, removing that rear bearing. Not fun. Okay, we're going to show you one of the differences between, this is out of a 63 MGB, 3 Synchro Gearbox. One of the differences on the third motion shaft from the MGAs is that the MGAs have the bushings at the end here, and the MGBs do not have the bushings in the tail shaft. It has bearings now, so that's one of the differences. As far as the gears, or the innards and all, they're basically the same as the MGA and the MGBs. So you can use this video to help rebuild both MGAs and MGBs. The second gears. The reason I disassembled again my transmission was that it was grinding in second gear when I was putting it in or downshifting, and found out the reason. The person who owned the car before me rebuilt it, I guess, himself, and this is the second gear. It looks good. The teeth are not too bad. They're a little bit worn down on the engagement teeth here, but that's fine. The second gear teeth look great, and everything else looks good on it. But lo and behold, you can see the difference. This is an uprated second gear. This is the original type second gear. And one main difference that you can see on that are right here. You can see how this is all machined nice and smooth all the way across, with the engagement teeth down below it. So it's got a nice and smooth. On the uprated second gear, you can see the difference here, how this is machined. It's what we call scalloped. It's been scalloped on the second gear part right here. Also, some of the second gear uprated have this type of moly coating. It's like a black coating to it. This one needs a steel Synchro ring. This one, the original second gear that came out of it, not the uprated one, uses a brass Synchro ring. When I took my gearbox apart, I noticed that this was not a brass. Let me get you a brass one so you can see it. Brass, you can tell there's a big difference in brass and a steel Synchro ring. So when I was looking at it inside the gearbox, I noticed that, well, I've got a steel Synchro ring, and I even took a magnet, tested it. Sure enough, it was right on there. You can see how this is flush up against the second gear. When I took it all apart, I said, well, this should have had a brass synchronizer. The guy who had it before me put it in the steel synchronizer ring and put it all back together. Now you can look in here on this guy. You can see all the nice machine grooves. They're gone. They're basically rubbed raw. They're rubbed smooth. On the new piece, you can see how it's got grooves in it on the synchronizer inside there. This one won't fit. Let me put it on here. And you can see when you put it together, it rides on there real nice, and you can see there's a distance between the engagement. There's a nice little gap in between there. This one's flush up against it, worn out. So that was why we were grinding in second gear. Original second gear with a steel synchronizer ring does not go. Even in the Moss catalogs they say that's a no-no. So that should do it. Well, that's the second gear. Second gear looks good. We'll examine some other parts on the main, on the third motion shaft. Again, you want to look here where the needle bearings are, nice and clean. This is a great third motion shaft. Everything looks good here. The bushings for third and second gear, they're all nice. These all mic'd out. The thrust washers mic'd out nice. The front, the forward, and the rear. These thrust washers mic'd out exactly to specs in from the manual. Here's a rear thrust washer. That one mic'd out nice. We'll be replacing the synchronizers for third and fourth. We'll go ahead and replace those since we're already touring this far. We're going to replace all the synchronizers, second gear, third, and fourth. Here's third gear. Looks real nice. Just check all your gears. Here's second gear, the one I'm going to be using. Here's first gear. Assembly. Those teeth look real nice. Engagement teeth are a little bit worn, but that can be expected with a non-synchro first speed gear. A little bit of grinding going there, but that looks nice. Machine part looks nice. This looks good. The distance pieces, they all look good. That's basically it on the examination of the third motion shaft and the differences between the uprated and original second gear for this part, for this MGB gearbox and MGA gearbox for that matter. What I did also was I went ahead and blew out through these oiling holes, make sure that I got air coming out of here and air coming out of these guys here. So just blew through here, and the oil air comes out here, so that's nothing's clogged up in there. Check the bearing. Bearing's nice. Didn't have to replace that. If you did have to replace it, again, just pop it out, put the new one on, and we'll show you how to do that on the first motion shaft. How to take this bearing off. We got to replace this bearing on the first motion shaft. And that should do it. Thank you. Okay, wanted to talk to you. Probably the main reason why you're going to rebuild a gearbox is that they're grinding gears or something is grinding in there, most likely in second gear, which was the case with mine. Most likely it's going to be your synchronizers. And what I found out with mine was, had the early style synchronizer, early style second gear, but the guy who rebuilt it before me had the steel synchronizer ring in there. And you can see, as I zoom in, I bring this up here, you can see that there is no clearance. Normally the synchronizer will ride on the cone of the gear like this, and you'll have a little bit of clearance in between the gear itself and the right in between here and the synchronizer. This one's all the way flush up against the gear, and you see that it's just worn out all the grooves on there. And what he did was he put a steel synchronizer ring on the early style, so that's a no-no. But normal one, if you can see right here, push this back a little bit. Here's the third gear right here. Let me zoom in on it a little bit. Bear with me. Okay. You can see that this guy has got a little bit of clearance in between. I'm pushing up against it. You can see it's got clearance right there. So this guy is good. That's a good synchronizer. Here's a later style second gear right here. You can see what this guy's done. He's put a brass synchronizer ring on this one. And that guy's all the way flush up against there, so that's a no-no also. So very unusual. But that's out of the 65 MGB. But for your synchronizer rings, I just went ahead and replaced all of mine just to be on the safe side. What you'll get on some of the synchronizer ring, this one was out of the 63 MGB. This is probably the third and fourth gear right here. As you can see, it's a little bit of worn. You'll get a little bit of wear right here on this guy. Not much. That's still fairly good right there. Compared to here's probably the fourth gear. There's practically no wear on this one. Looks brand new. And you can see the ridges are all good. But I went ahead and replaced mine. What you'll get is the wear on these right here, what they call a doghouse. They'll wear like a groove in it if they've been shifted for a long time. So that's where it'll wear out on the synchronizer rings. But on my case, just the wrong components put together. So check synchronizer rings. You just want to make sure you got a gap. Make sure you have a nice little gap in between when you're pushing up against it. Nice little gap right there. And that the doghouse is nice and in a good shape. So that's the basic checks on your synchronizer rings. So hopefully that'll help you out. Okay, now I'd like to go over some of our other items that need to be inspected. Got them, most of them up here on the table. Your clutch withdrawal lever. What you'll want to do obviously is the clutch release bearing. You'll go ahead and replace that. So you'll get a new assembly there. There's a brass bushing in here where this bolt comes through in this fashion. Go ahead and replace it. I went ahead and replaced mine. It's not that expensive. Just take a socket, the diameter of the bushing, a larger socket so that this bushing will fit inside that socket. Set it up, put the socket on top, knock the old one out, and do the same, pushing in the new one and stuff. And go ahead, and I went ahead, got the washer and the bolt and all from Moss, and that's just a good idea to do that. I have no telling how much this one takes, a lot of wear and tear. So I would recommend replacing the bushing and the bolts and stuff. On your cover assembly here, the front cover assembly, obviously we're going to replace the seal, the front and also the rear seals. Is a good idea to replace those. This one I've already replaced. The front cover itself, once you clean all the gasket material off, this has to be a precise, nicely machined. What you can do to check it, make sure it's not warped or anything, is just get a plate of glass, set it on a plate of glass and see if it's warped. You know, just check to make sure that this assembly is not warped and stuff. If it is, try to find a new front assembly if you can, or a used one on eBay or something. So that covers that. This guy here is your, what's the name for this guy? Forgotten. There he is. 82. Bear with me. Arm assembly, interlock lay shaft. This guy here. Make sure that it moves. It's going to be nice and a little stiff and all. What they say happens is this rivet here wears out a little bit and you'll get a little slop in this thing. This one's nice and tight and stuff. So this one's good to go. Also your reverse gear has brass bushing here. These rarely, I've never seen these wear out. But again, take a look at the shaft, make sure it's nice and clean and that there's no play in this one. This one is very nice. Right there. Here's your speedo gear. and the assembly that it goes in. Just check, make sure that it's nice and smooth, and this one just rides into plastic. It's got an oil pickup in it. And what we're going to replace here, there's a little seal right there. And we're gonna knock this one out and put in a new seal, clean this up a little bit. So this one has a seal where we're going to replace. There's also a gasket, so clean the gasket material off of this. And that should do it for that guy. The next one are your selector forks. Just make sure that these guys are not worn too bad. This is where they do all the shifting and stuff. And just check, make sure that they're nice and clean. You can clean them up a little bit with a file if there's a couple of rough edges. Also your selector forks, the brass. Make sure those are nice and clean. Nothing's broke. Not a lot of wear and tear on these guys, so they look good. Check to make sure that you have your speed wire on also. If not, just go out and buy some safety wire from your auto parts and make sure that you put those on. These do have to have safety wire. Make sure they're nice and tight. So that's that. Last guy I have up here on the table is your shifter. What you want to look here is this little plastic bushing. Make sure it's on there first of all, and make sure that there's not a lot of movement in it. This has a split where you can take it off. But this one's nice and is in good shape. Obviously we're going to replace the shifter boot, but and then we'll clean the material, clean for the gasket right there. So just check on that. And the one last thing that I'll bring up here in just a little bit after I clean out the table is the rear tail house extension. Okay, here's one of the little areas that that might get you when you're doing your inspection and cleaning of the gearbox assembly. Is this little hole right here. In the gearbox on the top here, there's a little trough that runs from the front of the gearbox all the way back to this hole right here where the oil will come back out. Then this little trough, when the gears are rotating, the oil is being splashed around all in the gearbox, and it loads up here in this little trough up in here, and gravity feeds the oil coming back down through this oiling hole here, which drips oil down onto your selector fork assembly here and down in this area. If we look at the tail house extension also, let's see, it'll come through, looks like about right here at this point. It'll come back down, actually come back down, snake its way back down through here and into this oiling hole and back down into the assembly. So with that being said, make sure when you're cleaning the gearbox that you look at this trough and make sure that it's clean up in there. And then also this hole here on mine was pretty much had a lot of stuff in it. I'll give you a sample. Here's some of the stuff that came out of it. And there were some of the fine metal particles also. Here's some gasket material that the previous owner rebuilt, put gasket material. Here's some fine metal particles in it also. So good idea to clean that guy out and make sure that trough is clean up there on your gearbox assembly. Okay, some other items you want to check on your tail house extension for wear and tear. Your shaft here, this is nice and smooth, your remote shaft, and your selector lever rear and front. Make sure that they are nice and not gouged out. And so these look pretty nice. Your oil your breather right here is plastic. When you take the gearbox out, sometimes you might knock this guy off or break it. And be careful when you install your gearbox back in that you don't catch it on something and break it, because it is just plastic. But your gearbox has to breathe. When these parts start moving around, the pressure from all that moving around has to go somewhere, and this is where it's going to be breathing from. So a very important piece. That that should be it. We've gone over basically everything else. There is one other thing that you might want to know about on the rear tailhouse extension, and I'm not sure if we can get this on there, but right in here in the extension, right up in here, there's a little trough, and what that is there is it catches the oil that's being spun around, and the oil is fed on that little trough all the way to the back, and you see where it's got the little right here, that's where the oil comes through, and inside here after the bearing there's an oiling hole where the oil feeds out, and it feeds oil back here to the back for the bearing and stuff, and then this gravity takes it back through the bearing up towards the front of the gearbox. So just be aware of that trough, make sure that that's clean in there, and that the oiling hole in the back is not clogged up with any debris or anything. So that's basically the things you need to look for on your tailhouse extension when you inspect it. Okay, that basically completes the disassembly of the MGB or the MGA gearbox. The only other thing that I've never found a reason to disassemble this unit here. There was no really reason to disassemble it. All it does is holds the selector shafts and stuff, and the springs and detent ball bearings. So I've never taken these off myself. When you clean these guys up, just take your time again. Clean all the gasket surfaces. I use a putty knife. I get a certain angle and I just start scraping on it. Just take your time, get all the gasket material off. This is the actual gearbox that I'm going to be putting back in the 63 MGB. It came out of it. I've cleaned up the gearbox and tailhouse shaft assembly. As you can see, quite a bit of difference between that and this guy right here. And again, just a good old wire brush and stuff. Just take your time, knock it out, and have at it. The main thing is clean all your gasket surfaces. Make sure they're all nice and clean, and get ready to clean out the inside. Make sure you get all the stuff out of there, any metal debris, if there's anything in there. And just clean everything out the best you can. Thank you. Okay, I want to describe some of the differences that you'll see. The first one is we'll talk about the main shafts. As you can see, this one's all rusted up and boogered up on the end here. This was the one this was the gearbox that I dismantled for you. I actually had a good deal, $1.50 on the eBay. Went and picked it up myself in the Carolinas, so I knew it was messed up with the gears, but it had some good qualities on the inside. Some of the gears were very good and stuff, which is what I was shooting for. But you can see he left it outside with this in the ground. It was boogered up, but don't worry about that. This is my 63 MGB main shaft, and this is what I'm going to be rebuilding is the 63 MGB gearbox. But I want to show you the main differences between the MGAs and MGBs, the main shafts. The first being when I don't have an example of it, but the MGAs had a 10 spline main shaft. The MGBs and on up, MGBs 3 Synchros had the 23 spine. As you can see here, both of these have 23 spine. Another difference is the 3 main bearing engines for the MGBs had a smaller diameter where the pilot bushing, where this goes into the pilot bushing in the flywheel. You can see on this one here it's quite a bit thicker. And the difference on those, let's see, run them down, and again, Moss Europe has all these parts and they actually have the actual part numbers. So that's why I like to go to Moss Europe to get the actual part numbers and stuff. But the 3 main motors had a smaller diameter shaft and it's a .62 inch diameter versus a .85 diameter. So the 5 main bearing engines with the 3 Synchros had a larger shaft on it, and that's the difference in the first motion shafts. Okay, next I want to show you the differences in the third motion shaft, this third motion shaft. The MGAs had, I don't have an example for you, I don't have an MGA gearbox for you to see, but the early MGAs had what we call the slip-on, like a US type shaft coming out of the gearbox, where the yoke of the drive shaft would just slip on in the splines here, just slip onto this third main shaft. Whereas the very late MGAs, I think the 1600s, and the MGBs had the flange type, where the flange would fit on the third motion shaft in such a fashion. That's tight tolerances there. It would slip on, and then you would attach it with the nuts onto the third motion shaft. So that is the main difference in the third motion shafts for the MGAs and MGBs. Okay, next I'd like to describe the difference in the lay shaft. There are two lay shafts, and if you look in the Moss catalog, they'll describe it. The 3-bearing lay shaft, which is what I got, which will go with this lay gear here, supports a 3 bearing, and you can tell by there's the 3 oil holes right here for the 3 bearings. And the lay shaft oil passes through towards the end and supplies oil to the bearings right here. But this is the 3 bearing lay shaft. The diameter on this is 0.643, and I actually marked it out just to make sure. The larger lay shaft is for MGBs with engine 18G from 18GB UH 74720, and you can look that up in the catalog. And that would be a 4-bearing lay shaft, a little larger diameter. That would be a 0.668, so 2/100ths, a little bit 2/100ths larger than the smaller version. And you would actually have a fourth hole right here, oiling hole for the 4th bearing. You would have 4 bearings on that lay shaft. So that's the difference in the lay shaft. Okay, the next difference is the 3rd and 4th selector. This piece right here, this brass piece here. On the MGAs, this was a solid brass piece. If you can picture this spacer here just being a solid brass piece. So all this selector, 3rd and 4th selector fork here, would be solid brass that would slide onto this shaft. Great cost to make that. MG, when they came out with the MGBs, they put in the spacer to cut down on having to mold that brass. Completely interchangeable. You could use a